The story of a galaxy begins with gravity, not with light, not with stars blazing in every color that the human eye will never see. It begins with an invisible pull that shapes chaos into order. If you were floating far outside the Milky Way, so far that even the brightest supergiant star becomes only a pale grain of dust, the galaxy would appear as a great spinning city of light. A spiral, elegant and calm, arms unfurling across millions of trillions of kilometers. Yet the calm is an illusion. Every star is in motion. Every orbit is a negotiation with gravity. A galaxy is not merely a group of stars. It is a gravitational ecosystem. Hundreds of billions of suns, each with their own planets and moons, move together as though following a shared choreography. And yet, there is no conductor, no guiding blueprint, only the mutual attraction of matter pulling on matter. Every star influences every other star. The gravity of one star whispers across light years to the gravity of another. Taken together, those whispers form structure. Imagine an ocean, not of water, but of space itself. Ripples are created by mass. Where mass is concentrated, space curves. Anything placed there follows the curvature. That is what orbits truly are. Not loops carved by momentum, but objects forever falling into curved space, missing the center and falling again. The star does not know it is orbiting. It only obeys the geometry of space. When astronomers describe the Milky Way, they tend to break it into parts. The galactic disk, where the spiral arms lie. The galactic bulge at the core, dense with older stars crowded together. The faint halo around it, where ancient star clusters drift. But these labels are conveniences invented by humans. To nature, it is all one body. Light only reveals the surface. The underlying skeleton of gravity binds it. The spiral arms are a mystery that took more than a century to understand. At first glance, one might think that the spiral shape is simply the smear of stars as they slide outward, like paint spun on a wheel. But if that were true, the arms would wind tighter and tighter as the galaxy aged. They would eventually wrap around the core like string around a spool. Instead, the arms persist. They are not rigid structures, but patterns of density, like waves on the surface of the sea. Stars flow through these waves, just as water flows through an ocean wave. The pattern moves, yet the material composing it does not stay in one place. Gravity maintains the spiral, guiding stars into regions where they temporarily bunch together and then drift onward. Without gravity, the pattern would vanish. The galaxy would lose its symmetry and dissolve into chaos. Every star in a spiral galaxy orbits the center, not because it wants to circle anything. Motion was inherited from the collapse of a giant cloud of gas. The cloud had even a slight rotation, and as it contracted under gravity, angular momentum made the rotation faster and faster. Just as a figure skater spins faster when pulling their arms inward, the collapsing cloud twisted itself into a disk. Then, within that disk, gravity stitched matter into stars. Gas and dust are not passive. They feel the gravitational tug even more strongly than stars because they are not rigid. Interstellar gas collapses into long filaments. At points along those filaments, the density grows so high that the gas ignites into new suns. Wherever density peaks, heat and pressure build until hydrogen becomes helium and nuclear fusion begins. Gravity births light. Yet stars do not stay where they are born. Orbits carry them around the galaxy. Some drift outward, some fall inward. Massive stars live fast and die violently. They explode as supernovas, releasing heavy elements that later form planets and living chemistry. Every supernova shakes the surrounding gas, sculpting new structures and triggering new births. A galaxy is alive with feedback. Gravity pulls matter inward, and stellar energy pushes it outward. That balance allows the galaxy to evolve without collapsing or losing coherence. Still, the mass of visible stars is not enough to explain how galaxies behave. When we look at the outer regions of spiral galaxies, the stars there are moving far too fast to be held by the gravity of the visible matter alone. They should fly off into intergalactic emptiness. Yet they remain. Something keeps them tethered. Even without naming it, we sense the presence of something unseen. Gravity is telling us there is more mass than our eyes reveal. The spiral galaxy is not just a collection of suns swimming through a thin disk. It is embedded in a vast, invisible sphere of matter. This hidden matter exerts the majority of the gravitational force. Without it, the spiral arms would not exist. The stars would scatter like sparks thrown into the night wind. When one contemplates a galaxy from the outside, it feels complete and permanent. But if we zoom inward, the illusion fades. Stars are separated by such immense distances that calling a galaxy crowded is ironic. If the sun were the size of a grain of sand, the nearest star would be another grain of sand placed more than 100 kilometers away. The galaxy is almost entirely emptiness. Yet gravity weaves those scattered particles into a coherent whole. There is a tension at the heart of the galaxy. Motion tries to fling stars away. Gravity whispers, "Stay." The whisper wins. Not with force, but with inevitability. Picture a star near the outer edge. It moves through space like a runner on a curved track. If gravity vanished, the star would not suddenly fall or stop. It would continue moving in a straight line. Like letting go of a spinning stone, it would leave the orbit forever. Multiply that by hundreds of billions, and the galaxy would unravel. Structure exists only because gravity insists on it. The spiral is not the starting point. It is the result of invisible negotiation. A galaxy is an argument that gravity wins. And if that gravity ever ceased to exist, the galaxy would not collapse inward, it would collapse outward. Everything currently held in the intricate dance would be released into the black. Nothing about a galaxy is guaranteed. Not the stars, not the arms, not the disk. The only permanent thing is the pull that keeps everything together. Soon, we will remove that pull. At the heart of most large galaxies lies a presence so immense that language struggles to describe it. A supermassive black hole, containing millions of times the mass of the sun, waits in the darkness. It does not pull the galaxy together like a central anchor. Its gravity is fierce only close to its edge. Far away, the collective gravity of the stars and the unseen matter dominates. Still, the black hole influences the behavior of the surrounding gas. When gas spirals inward, friction heats it to incredible temperatures. The galaxy core can flare with radiation brighter than entire galaxies. Yet even this colossal furnace is not what holds the galaxy in place. The galaxy exists because gravity is shared, not centralized. The structure grows from cooperation, not command. If one could travel through the galaxy, not by crossing space but by slowing time so that motion itself becomes visible, the view would be astonishing. Stars that appear frozen on the night sky would begin to glide, each tracing its path around the center. Some move in almost perfect circles. Others follow long-stretched orbits that carry them through the spiral arms and back again. Gas clouds drift like slow-moving glaciers, sculpted by shockwaves from ancient supernovas. Giant molecular clouds, cold and dark, wander until gravity compacts them. New stars ignite in clusters like sparks from an invisible forge. The life of a galaxy is a conversation between gravity and time. It is not static. The spiral arms are temporary patterns that persist for millions upon millions of years and then slowly evolve. galaxies collide. They merge. They grow. When two large galaxies meet, they do not smash like solid objects. The stars almost never collide directly because the space between them is so vast. Instead, gravity redistributes their orbits. The elegant spirals warp and stretch, forming tails of stars thrown far into space. Over time, the chaos settles, and a new galaxy is born. Every star is a traveler. The sun itself has not always been where it is now. Since its birth more than 4 billion years ago, it has circled the galaxy many times. There is no special path reserved for it. The sun follows the same rules as every other star. Its motion is dictated by the curved landscape of gravity. It is possible that the sun was born in a star cluster that has long since dispersed. Its siblings, the stars that once formed beside it, now wander elsewhere in the galaxy. Gravity allowed the cluster to form. Time allowed it to dissolve. When astronomers measured the rotation of stars in spiral galaxies, they expected stars farther from the center to orbit more slowly, much like the outer planets in the solar system move slower than the inner ones. Instead, they found that stars on the edge of the galaxy move just as quickly as stars near the center. Something unseen provides extra gravitational glue. Even though we cannot detect it with light, we measure its influence through motion. The stars reveal the hidden truth. The mass we see cannot explain the shape we observe. The visible stars and gas are only the surface pattern of a deeper structure. That structure is composed largely of something mysterious. Astronomers call it dark matter, not because it is dark, but because it does not interact with light. We know it exists only because of the extra gravity it provides. Without it, the galaxy could not hold together. Yet even without naming the unseen mass, we understand the importance of gravity. Imagine removing the gravitational influence between every star. Imagine that the pull weakens, not over billions of years, but instantly. The combined motion of the stars would no longer be held in balance. Each star would continue in a straight path, obeying the ancient rule of inertia. The pattern of the spiral arms would vanish. The galaxy would not crumble inward. It would expand outward. The stars would scatter into the empty space between galaxies, moving forever with no force to slow them. Light itself does not bind the galaxy. Radiation rushes outward. It cannot hold anything. Only gravity can create order from emptiness. If we could stand on a planet orbiting a distant star and look up, the sky would rarely reveal the architecture of the galaxy we inhabit. Space hides its own structure. From the ground, the night sky appears as scattered points. Only when we look with telescopes that gather faint light across vast distances does the plan of the galaxy reveal itself. Stars are so far apart that even in regions thick with starlight, space remains overwhelmingly empty. The galaxy feels solid when seen from afar, but from within, it feels almost hollow. This contrast between appearance and reality is one of the universe's quietest deceptions. From a great distance, a spiral galaxy appears like a single living organism. Up close, it becomes a wilderness of isolated suns. The coherence we admire is the result of gravity holding things together against the natural tendency of motion to scatter them apart. Galaxies are not objects. They are processes. They are stories written across cosmic time. Gravity gathers gas. Gas creates stars. Stars produce heavy elements. Those elements become planets. Planets may become habitats. Everything that can happen happens only because gravity waits patiently and refuses to let go. A galaxy is not stable because its stars are still. It is stable because motion and gravity reach a quiet agreement. Now imagine taking that agreement away. The choreography ends. The dance dissolves. The stars leave their orbits and wander alone into the dark. The architecture of a galaxy is the architecture of a fragile piece. Motion wants freedom. Gravity demands order. The galaxy exists in the narrow difference between the two, and soon we will ask the question no galaxy can survive. What happens when gravity is removed? In the 1970s, an astronomer named Vera Rubin watched galaxies in a way no one had done before. Others had photographed their shapes and admired their spiraling arms, but Rubin measured something deeper. She studied how fast stars moved around their galactic centers. She was not looking for beauty, she was looking for evidence. When she plotted the speed of stars at various distances from the center of a spiral galaxy, she expected a simple pattern. Stars near the center should orbit quickly. Stars farther out, where there is less visible mass, should slow down. It is the same reason that planets far from the Sun take longer to complete their orbits. Less mass means less gravity. Less gravity means slower speed. That was the prediction. Nature refused to obey. Stars at the far edge of every galaxy that Rubin measured were moving just as fast as stars near the core. In some cases, even faster. According to the known laws of gravity, those stars should have been flung into intergalactic space, yet they did not escape. Something held them in place. Rubin had discovered the most invisible thing in the universe. The stars were pointing at a presence that did not shine. Whatever it was, it had mass. It exerted gravitational pull, but it produced no light at all. It did not absorb light. It did not reflect it. It allowed photons to pass through as if it were not there. Rubin named this unseen mass the dark matter. Dark in this sense does not mean shadow. It means beyond the reach of every instrument that depends on light. Nearly all of the mass of the galaxy is composed of something we cannot detect directly. The visible stars are only the decoration. The true body of the galaxy is a vast sphere of dark matter that surrounds and permeates it, like an invisible skeleton. The numbers are astonishing. Only about 15% of a galaxy's gravitational mass comes from the stars, gas, dust, and glowing nebulae that telescopes can see. The rest, around 85%, is this unknown mass. Without it, the galaxy would simply not hold together. Imagine a whirlpool in a river. Leaves and twigs swirl because the water beneath them moves in a spiral. The leaves are visible, the water is not. Dark matter plays the role of the water. Stars are the leaves, caught in a deeper current they cannot escape. Rubin's discovery shattered a comforting idea. Scientists had assumed that the universe was made primarily of the matter that humans interact with every day. The matter that makes up atoms, planets, life, and light. Rubin showed that this familiar matter is only a tiny fraction of reality. The universe is mostly something else. Not emptiness, not void. Something with mass, structure, influence, and yet complete invisibility. Gravity is the only way we know it exists. Dark matter does not behave like any particle we understand. It does not collide with other particles. It does not form atoms or molecules. It has no chemistry. It passes through ordinary matter like a ghost. Entire galaxies can collide and merge, and the dark matter clouds within them slip through each other without so much as a spark. This invisible matter shapes the structure of the cosmos. Before stars existed, before galaxies took form, dark matter began to clump under its own gravity. These clumps created wells in space. Gas fell into those wells, compressed, and ignited into the first stars. Without dark matter, there would be no galaxies at all. There would only be scattered gas drifting in endless and unstructured space. Think of dark matter as scaffolding erected before a building is constructed. The scaffolding holds everything in place. The building may be made of brick, but without the hidden frame, it would collapse. Even the shape of spiral arms is influenced by the dark matter halo. The the visible disk of stars sits like a thin, glowing plane inside an enormous sphere of unseen mass. If we could see that halo, we would not see a spiral. We would see an immense rounded cloud, tens of times larger than the visible disk, stretching across distances far beyond the reach of starlight. Rubin once said that galaxies should not exist, not according to the mass we see. The fact that they do exist means that something keeps them from flying apart, that something is dark matter. Yet here is a quiet truth. While dark matter holds stars in orbit, we still do not know what it is. Candidates have been proposed. Invisible particles formed in the first moments after the Big Bang. Exotic forms of matter that do not interact with radiation. New physics beyond anything in the standard model. Physicists built detectors deep underground to find traces of dark matter particles. Decades of searching have revealed no direct sightings. And still, we know it must be there, because stars cannot lie. Motion reveals mass. A star orbiting the edge of a galaxy behaves like a messenger. It carries information about the unseen. Its speed is a sentence written in curved space. If you can read that sentence, you learn the mass of the galaxy. Rubin read it with precision and honesty. The message was clear. The mass of the galaxy is far greater than what our eyes perceive. The invisible determines the fate of the visible. If dark matter were removed, even gradually, the delicate equilibrium holding the stars in orbit would falter. Without the hidden mass, the gravitational binding of the galaxy would weaken. The stars on the outer edges would be the first to feel the change. They would begin to drift. Orbits would widen and stretch. The spiral arms would loosen. The graceful pattern that defines the galaxy would blur. The stars would not crash inward. They would fall outward, no longer held by the invisible weight. And this leads to the most provocative question we can ask. What would happen if the entire dark matter halo vanished at once? If the dark matter halo disappeared in a single instant, the change would not be gentle. It would be as if the skeleton of the galaxy had dissolved. The stars would notice immediately, not through sight or sound, but through motion. The delicate balance that keeps billions of suns circling the galactic center would vanish. Every star that had been gliding around the center would find that the inward pull no longer matched its speed. The stars would continue moving, but now their paths would straighten. Instead of following curved orbits, they would drift away in the direction of their current momentum. The spiral arms would not slowly fade. They would unravel like threads pulled from a tapestry. Imagine watching this from a safe distance. The galaxy that once looked like a whirlpool of light would begin to distort. The elegant arms would twist as stars scattered outward. The core would remain bright for a time, because the inner region has more ordinary mass concentrated there. But even that inner region would soon stretch. Stars would peel away like sparks carried off by the wind. Gas clouds that once drifted together would disperse. Star formation would cease. Without dark matter, gravity would not be strong enough to pull gas into dense clumps anymore. The galaxy would continue expanding, slower at the center and faster at the edges, until it no longer resembled a galaxy at all. The change would not be explosive. It would be silent. It would be the stillness of motion set free. Scientists sometimes imagine removing dark matter in models just to see what would happen. The simulations show stars leaving their orbits, wandering into intergalactic space. There is a sense of loss in these simulations, not because the stars die, but because structure dies. A galaxy is more than a collection of stars. It is a relationship created by gravity. Every star knows where to move because of the collective pull of every other star, assisted by the deeper, invisible pull of dark matter. When dark matter is gone, the stars lose that shared sense of direction. Galaxies form when matter collects. Remove that ability to collect, and the universe becomes a place where nothing stays together. Dark matter does not shine, burn, or collide. It simply exists, yet it shapes the world in every direction. When we look at a night sky filled with stars, we are not truly seeing the universe. We are seeing the bright residue of dark matter at work. Dark matter is patient. It does not react, it does not scatter. It merely wraps itself around galaxies, like a gentle yet unbreakable field. Stars move inside that hidden field, like insects trapped in a spider's web. They feel the pull, but they do not understand the source. Even light cannot escape dark matter's influence. When light from distant galaxies passes through a dark matter cloud, the light bends. The effect is called gravitational lensing. We see distorted shapes of galaxies far away and realize there must be mass in front of them that we cannot see. The light acts like a traveler, passing over invisible hills. This is how we map the unseen, not by detecting what dark matter is, but by observing what it does. Every bend in space is evidence. Every curved path of a star is a signature. We chart the shapes of things we cannot touch. Physicists sometimes speak as if dark matter is a placeholder name, a promise that we will eventually uncover the true nature of this hidden mass. The term dark matter does not explain anything. It only admits ignorance. It says that we know something must be there, but we do not know what. There is humility in that. Science does not pretend to have all answers. It observes motion, infers cause, and accepts mystery. The universe is not obligated to reveal its secrets. Yet sometimes, motion speaks clearly. The speed of stars at the edge of a galaxy is a sentence written across millions of trillions of kilometers. Vera Rubin listened to that sentence, and the universe confessed its truth. Matter that shines is rare. Matter that shapes space without shining is abundant. Most of the universe is invisible. Most of reality is not made of atoms. Most of existence does not play by the rules humans learned when they built experiments out of laboratory equipment and earthly materials. We are the exception, not the rule. When we remove dark matter in imagination, we reveal how fragile galaxies truly are. They are temporary patterns held together by forces that care nothing for beauty. They are structures born from balance. Remove one part of that balance, and the stars do not hesitate. They leave. The galaxy dissolves into a drifting cloud of wandering suns. This is the first step in understanding a more terrifying possibility. If dark matter is removed, galaxies fall apart. But what if gravity itself were removed? Not weakened, not reduced, removed. The stars that once orbited with grace would not only drift, they would be flung into perfect straight-line paths through endless emptiness. Everything that depends on gravitational binding would come undone. Dark matter is the skeleton. Gravity is the existence. Gravity has always been subtle. It does not roar like fusion in a star. It does not crackle like electricity. It is the quiet sculptor of the cosmos, patient and persistent. In every corner of the universe, gravity negotiates motion. Planets do not orbit because they choose to. They orbit because gravity curves the path beneath them. Stars trace their long, slow arcs around the centers of galaxies because space itself tells them to follow those paths. Gravity is not a thing, it is a shape. Now imagine that shape simply stops, not fades, not weakens, ends. There is no sound when a force that controls galaxies disappears. No rip or explosion, no flash. In one moment, every star is guided. In the next, every star is free. When gravity is present, motion becomes orbit. When gravity ceases, motion becomes escape. The instant gravity turns off, Every object in the universe obeys a simpler law, a law older than stars, a law older than light. Objects in motion remain in motion. They follow straight paths forever unless a force redirects them. With no gravitational pull, there is no redirection. The dance ends. Picture a star in the outer reach of a spiral galaxy. Before the event, gravity bends its path into a gentle curve. After the event, that curve vanishes. The star flies away in a straight line, never to return. The same fate reaches every star, gas cloud, planet, asteroid, and grain of dust. Even the smallest pebble on a distant moon becomes a traveler with no home. Galaxies do not collapse inward when gravity is removed. They collapse outward. Once gravity stops, the past no longer matters. Stars do not remember their orbits. They do not know they once belonged to a structure. Every star simply keeps going with the speed and direction it had in the final moment before freedom. If we could watch it from outside, we would see the spiral arms unwind. The beautiful symmetry would distort, bend, stretch. The luminous arms would unravel into threads as stars rush away. The core of the galaxy, dense with mass, would remain intact a little longer. Not because gravity still binds it, but because the stars there have less outward momentum. Eventually, even the stars in the core will scatter. Every sun becomes a solitary traveler, crossing distances so large that the scale defies imagination. In the universe we know, gravity is woven into the geometry of space. It is the curvature caused by mass. Einstein revealed this in his general theory of relativity. Space tells matter how to move. Matter tells space how to curve. Remove gravity, and that conversation ends. Space becomes flat. Motion becomes absolute. Some physicists describe this imagined event in Newtonian terms, because Newton's laws give us a simpler picture. In Newtonian physics, objects move in straight lines unless acted upon by a force. Gravity is that force. Remove it, and every orbit unwinds instantly. Einstein's view adds elegance. Instead of forces being removed, the geometry itself changes. There is no curvature, no bending. Space becomes featureless. Either way, the result is the same. No orbit can survive. Think of a stone tied to a string. Swing it in a circle. The stone travels around you because the string holds it in place. Cut the string, and the stone shoots away. Nothing pushes it outward. It simply follows the path that momentum demands. A star orbiting a galaxy is the stone. Gravity is the string. Remove the string, and the star follows a straight path through darkness. When the entire galaxy loses gravity, the result is universal escape. In the first few thousand years, the structure merely warps. If an intelligent civilization were observing from inside, they might not notice immediately. Stars shift slowly over time. It would take generations to realize their night sky is changing. Constellations they had always known would drift apart. Lines between familiar stars would stretch. For a brief period, the galaxy would resemble itself, merely softer in shape, slightly more diffuse. In the first million years, the spiral pattern becomes vague. The arms do not merely fade. They elongate and shred into streams. Entire clusters peel off and drift into isolation. The galaxy has no boundary anymore. Its previous shape remains only as a memory held by light arriving from the past. Anyone watching from a distant vantage point would see the ghost of the spiral long after its stars have begun to escape. Over tens of millions of years, the galaxy is gone. It no longer exists as a structure. It becomes a cloud of individual stars spreading out into the intergalactic void. There is no center, no inside or outside, only directionless travel. Nothing binds anything. You may wonder what happens to smaller structures. What about star clusters and binary systems? Does the gravitational switch erase their bonds too? Yes. Every relationship that depends on gravity dissolves. In a realistic universe, gravity cannot switch off like a light. It is not a field that can be severed. It is geometry. But in this thought experiment, we allow ourselves to consider what physics forbids. The universe without gravity is the universe returned to its natural motion. Motion without curves, paths without loops. Without gravity, the stars abandon the galaxy, and once every star is alone, drifting, it becomes something new, a rogue. When a star becomes a rogue, nothing around it tells it which direction is home. It travels through space that no longer holds memory. There is no map, no grid, no center to orbit. The star simply moves, carrying its own tiny sphere of influence. It drags planets, moons, asteroids if they were once bound to it, but only until those worlds are shaken loose by the sudden absence of surrounding structure. A galaxy dissolving into rogue stars is like a shattered necklace. The beads were once connected by tension. Remove that tension and every bead rolls away on its own path, never meeting the others again. In the early stages of the escape, stars do not notice each other. They are too far apart for mutual attraction to matter. The average distance between stars in a spiral galaxy is measured in trillions of kilometers. Even when gravity was active, their interactions were subtle and slow. Without gravity, subtle becomes non-existent. Stars that once influenced each other through tiny tugs no longer share any relationship. A galaxy that once behaved like a single living structure becomes a cloud of separate destinies. If we imagine observing this moment from far away, we might expect the fleeing stars to shine brightly as they depart. But the universe does not care about visual symbolism. The light does not change. The stars themselves do not dim or flare. They continue burning through their fuel exactly as they did before. The transformation is not of the stars, but of the space between them. Structure fades. The universe becomes a place without patterns, without clusters, without cities of light. There is something strange in realizing that stars are not gravitationally aware. They do not know they have escaped. They do not feel freedom. They do not feel anything. They simply move. A star that once circled the galaxy center every few 100 million years may now spend eternity drifting through emptiness, never approaching another star at all. A journey that once had curvature becomes a line. Straight, endless, alone. From inside a solar system, the experience would be different. At first, nothing appears wrong. The planets still orbit the star because they are bound by the star's own gravitational field. But the night sky begins to shift. The familiar pattern of the galaxy begins to warp. The core of the galaxy, once a bright band across the sky, stretches like pulled fabric. Over generations, that band thins. Stars slide apart. Constellations unravel. Entire cultures could live and die without understanding what is happening. Only careful observation over centuries would reveal the truth. Every star drifts with silent purpose. The galaxy no longer exists as a single entity. As time continues, the distances between rogue stars grow. Gravity no longer slows them. Space expands. The stars slide deeper into isolation. The consequences reach beyond aesthetics. Without galaxies, there is no dense gas to recycle into new stars. Star formation had always depended on the gravitational compression of gas clouds. Without gravity binding gas into structures, gas cannot clump. No more galaxies means no more star nurseries. The stars that already exist will burn their fuel and die, but no new generation will replace them. The universe, once dynamic, becomes static. And yet, the process does not stop there. Removing gravity means removing the very engine that shapes the cosmic web. On the grand scale, galaxies form filaments. Filaments connect clusters. Clusters connect superclusters. Gravity is the architect of this web. Remove the architect and the scaffolding dissolves. The universe loses its structure not just on the scale of stars, but on the scale of billions of galaxies across unimaginable reaches of space. There is no explosion. There is no collapse. There is only expansion into meaninglessness. Without gravity, the universe becomes smooth. It becomes uniform. No peaks, no valleys, no structure, no hierarchy. Nothing collects, nothing forms, nothing holds. Some physicists describe gravity as the permission for structure. Without that permission, matter obeys motion alone. Motion does not create. Motion disperses. In a cosmos without gravity, there is no such thing as home. Travel far enough into the future of this impossible universe, and every star that once belonged to every galaxy now drifts in total isolation. Even the memory of a galactic structure is lost. No photograph from an alien civilization could show where their star once lived. The star is no longer part of anything larger than itself. With time, the stars grow faint. First, because the distance between them increases. Then because the stars themselves begin to age. Some will swell into red giants. Others will collapse into white dwarfs. Massive ones will go supernova, but their explosions will illuminate nothing. There will be no nearby gas clouds to compress. The light will fade into empty space that no longer contains witnesses. Once gravity is gone, every event in the universe becomes final. Even black holes cannot survive. A black hole is defined by gravity so intense that space folds inward. Without gravity, that fold disappears. The event horizon evaporates. The black hole releases everything it once captured. Space becomes flat where it once was curved. The universe becomes a place without complexity, a place without story. The removal of gravity erases not just structure, but history. There is no longer a center to anything, no rotation, no cycles, no return. There is only outward. This is the universe without gravity, a universe without binding, a universe where everything that once formed is undone. And yet, there is another consequence waiting beyond the scattering of stars. Once every star becomes a rogue, something else begins to change. Worlds that orbit those stars are about to face their own version of freedom. When the last traces of gravity slip away, the galaxy does not break. It dissolves. Every star that once belonged to a spiral arm is released from the orbit that defined its life. The moment is both gentle and absolute. Without the silent pull that guided their motion, stars become wanderers. They leave behind the architecture that gave them meaning, and they enter a universe where nothing waits for them and nothing follows them. A rogue star is a strange kind of exile. It is not hurled or thrown. It simply continues in the direction it was already moving. Its former orbit becomes a straight path that stretches into infinity. In the galaxy, stars once behaved like dancers circling a shared stage. Now, they drift on separate floors that expand forever. They do not notice the change because they never felt the orbit they once followed. They only feel motion. That motion now has no end. Stars were never close to one another, even when gravity existed. In all the vast disk of the Milky Way, the average distance between two neighboring stars is so large that it defies intuition. If the sun were the size of a small grain of sand placed on a quiet beach, the nearest star would be another grain of sand set more than 100 kilometers away. That emptiness remains. What changes is the loss of connection. Even the weak gravitational tug that once whisper-linked distant suns is gone. The stars are now islands in an expanding ocean without currents. In this new existence, the night sky for any civilization becomes a record of departure. The first few generations would hardly notice. Constellations shift, but constellations always shift with time. It is only over centuries that something unsettling becomes clear. Familiar shapes lengthen. The bright band of the galaxy becomes thinner, then uneven, then shredded. It pulls apart, like threads unraveling from the edge of a fabric. Eventually, the band disappears entirely. The night becomes scattered and random. There is no longer a pattern to follow, or a direction that points toward a galactic center. Imagine standing on a world orbiting a star that has just become a rogue. At first, life goes on untouched. The star still shines. The seasons continue. The world remains locked in its orbit, unaware of the cosmic liberation. Yet above that world, the sky is undergoing a transformation that no living creature can influence. Where there was once a great river of starlight, there is now emptiness. Consider what this means for the future. Stars are not eternal. They burn fuel, and fuel runs out. The universe once lived through cycles of birth and death. Gas clouds collapsed into new stars. Massive suns lived brief lives and then exploded, returning heavy elements into the galaxy. That material enriched the next generation of worlds. It allowed carbon and nitrogen and oxygen to exist in the atmospheres of planets where life could one day think and observe. Without galaxies, there are no star nurseries. Gas no longer collects. There are no future generations of suns. The universe becomes a one-time event. One generation of stars, without successors. The rogue stars drift farther and farther from one another. Their light takes longer and longer to reach any potential observer. Distances stretch slowly at first, then rapidly. Even if two stars begin their journey as neighbors, separated by only a few light years, their paths diverge. Millions of years later, the space between them is a desert of dark. In that desert, motion has no resistance. Nothing slows the star. Nothing guides it. It travels straight into eternity. Some stars travel with companions. Binary systems are common. Two stars once circled a shared center of mass, a cosmic duet held by the gravity that kept their dance tight and predictable. When gravity vanishes, the dance ends. If the two stars were orbiting each other with balanced speeds, their newfound freedom creates separation. The paths that once curved now diverge. The pair becomes a pair no longer. They drift apart, their companionship erased, not by conflict, but by the simple absence of connection. Other stars lived in clusters, families of thousands. The cluster formed when a giant cloud of gas collapsed. Stars born together share motion and share age. In a universe with gravity, clusters slowly diffuse over long spans of time. Without gravity, the diffusion becomes immediate. The cluster ripples outward. What once was a swarm becomes a scatter of individuals. On a larger scale, where once there were billions of stars in swirling arms, there is now a cloud of light so faint and thin that even the idea of a galaxy becomes laughable. The galaxy was a consequence of shared gravity. Remove the force, and the word galaxy becomes meaningless. A rogue star can travel across unimaginable reaches of space. The nearest galaxy becomes farther every moment. The large-scale structure of the cosmos, the interconnected filaments that once linked groups of galaxies into the great cosmic web, begins to fragment as every object follows its own trajectory. Galaxies were temporary gatherings. Without gravity, there are no gatherings at all. There is only individual motion. If an ancient intelligence lived long enough to observe the change, it would watch the sky grow empty. First, fewer bright stars, then fewer faint ones. The darkness grows not because stars vanish, but because distance wins. Light becomes a rare visitor. Eventually, a rogue star traveling through the universe will enter a region where the nearest other star is not a few light years away, but thousands, then millions. The star becomes the sole source of light and warmth in a region of space large enough to contain millions of planetary systems. If a civilization clings to a world orbiting such a star, it will never again see another sun in its sky. The loneliness becomes absolute. A star without a galaxy is a star without a destiny. It will burn through its hydrogen, swell into a red giant, cast off its outer layers and shrink into a white dwarf. It will cool over time until it becomes a black dwarf, a dead star radiating nothing. Without gravity, there is no rebirth, no cycle, just the slow extinguishing of light across the entire cosmos. Rogue stars travel through space for ages, measured not in centuries or millennia, but in stretches of time so vast that even imagination struggles. Their journeys cross distances that once took entire galaxies to define. In the galaxy, motion was shaped. In the void, motion is pure. A rogue star moves in a line that never bends, with only the memory of its last orbit carried in its speed. There is no destination. There is only continuation. With nothing pulling them back together, the stars drift into a darkness deeper than anything a galaxy could produce. In a spiral galaxy, even the spaces between stars are bright enough that the combined glow forms a thick band in the night sky. Now that band has vanished. A world orbiting a rogue star looks out into a sky where the background has gone silent. Instead of millions of suns visible as distant speckles, the sky becomes a sparse landscape of only a few points of light. Time stretches. Those remaining points shrink as the star travels farther into isolation. For a while, a planet orbiting a rogue star might still experience comfort. Seasons continue. Life, if it existed, may flourish. The orbit remains stable because the star keeps its own gravity. The star maintains its small family. Planets circle, moons circle planets, and local gravity still functions. But this stability is temporary. Every planetary system is a delicate balance of forces. When the galaxy existed, its gravity provided subtle stabilizing influence. Without the greater structure surrounding them, planetary orbits become more vulnerable to tiny nudges. Over generations, those nudges accumulate. A planet that once orbited peacefully could slowly drift into a more elongated path. Some planets will spiral closer to the star, others will drift outward. The most fragile systems may break entirely. Gas giants on wide orbits are easily disturbed, and if they drift too far, they will be ejected completely. They become rogue planets, planets without stars, frozen worlds wandering through endless night. If intelligent life exists on such worlds, they would lose the sky first and the star second. When the galaxy dissolves, so does the narrative of belonging. The stars in their sky were once a map. Their stories, constellations, directions, myths, histories, all depended on shared landmarks. The night sky is humanity's oldest scripture. It tells us where we are. It tells us where we came from. Without constellations, direction becomes meaningless. Without nearby stars, orientation becomes impossible. The cosmos becomes without reference. A civilization looking upward would not understand what has changed. Their star still burns, their world still turns, but their view of the universe has become strangely empty. They would search for other suns and find almost none. Their history books might describe a sky dense with stars. Their research archives might hold images of neighboring suns. Now those records feel like dreams. The local star system becomes a bubble of warmth in an infinite desert. Over time, loneliness is not just emotional, it becomes physical. Stars were once part of a community. They shared gas and dust, they collided, they fed each other. Shock waves from supernovas compressed clouds that formed new stars. Minerals created in the belly of a dying star became the seeds of worlds that could hold life. Every act of creation required proximity. That proximity is gone. With no new stars, no new heavy elements emerge. There will be no second generation of life-bearing worlds. The stars that roam alone burn through their fuel without purpose. When the hydrogen at their core is consumed, the star expands into a red giant. It sheds layers of its outer atmosphere into space. In the era of galaxies, this material would eventually mix with cold gas and become future stars. In the gravity-less era, it drifts thinly into emptiness, spreading too far and too thin to ever gather again. The end of a rogue star follows a predictable path. Once its outer layers are lost, the star shrinks into a white dwarf, a small hot core roughly the size of a planet, but containing the mass of a sun. With no companions and no gas clouds nearby, the white dwarf cools in isolation. Over billions upon billions of years, the heat dissipates. The star fades into a black dwarf, a cold remnant that no longer shines. In the age of galaxies, black dwarfs are eventually consumed by gravity, merging into larger structures or encountering other stars. Without gravity, they remain where they are placed by inertia, drifting alone. A black dwarf does not illuminate anything. It has no presence except mass and memory. In the gravityless universe, the final form of every star is darkness. Even the violent deaths change. Massive stars used to explode as supernovas. Those explosions were punctuation marks in the story of matter. They enriched the galaxy with heavier elements: iron in blood, calcium in bones, carbon in cells. In the new universe of isolation, these explosions still occur, but they serve no purpose. The matter ejected travels outward into a space where it will never collect. The shock wave expands, but it compresses nothing. The heavy elements once destined to become new worlds instead disperse into a thin fog. It is difficult to overstate what is lost. In a universe held together by gravity, everything is connected. In a universe without gravity, nothing is. A rogue star that once warmed a thriving world will eventually die. When that happens, the world becomes a frozen sphere. Its oceans lock beneath sheets of ice. If a civilization was present, it faces extinction unless it finds another source of energy. No sunlight, no warmth, only the echo of the star that once sustained life. The absence of gravity removes more than motion. It removes hope of return. It removes cycles. It removes the possibility of new beginnings. A universe of rogue stars is a universe with no future. Yet this is only a step in the unfolding collapse of structure. Stars were the first to lose one another. Soon, something even larger begins to fail. The architecture of the universe itself starts to unweave. The fabric that once connected galaxies and clusters begins to loosen. The cosmic web itself prepares to dissolve. When a star becomes a wanderer in a universe without gravity, it is not the only traveler set adrift. Worlds that once moved in steady circles around their star now find that stability is fragile. Gravity still exists on the scale of a star system because each star holds its own planets with its own pull. But the absence of the greater structure of a galaxy removes the quiet influence that once helped keep planetary orbits stable. Worlds that held to their paths through a delicate balance of forces now discover that balance can be broken. Planets are not aware of the star they follow. They respond to the shape of space around them. When that shape changes, even slightly, they respond with motion. Small changes matter. A tiny nudge that would have been corrected by the smooth gravitational sea of the galaxy no longer fades into equilibrium. Instead, it grows. Orbits stretch. Ellipses elongate. A world that once traced a faithful curve now wobbles. Over thousands of years, the wobble becomes deviation. Over millions, deviation becomes escape. Some planets drift inward toward their star. They spiral into heat that strips their oceans and melts their crust. Others drift outward, losing their warmth. The most unstable paths end with the planet breaking free entirely. The world keeps moving along whatever direction it held at the final moment before freedom. It becomes a rogue planet, a world without a sun. There is no burst, no event, no violence. The release is silent. A planet simply keeps moving in the direction it was already traveling, following a path that no longer loops back. If life existed on such a world, that life would witness the final sunset without understanding its meaning. The sky would grow darker every season. The star would shrink to a faint disk, then a dot, then a memory. Soon the temperature falls, oceans begin to freeze, rivers become glass, the surface becomes silent. A world that once held warmth becomes a wandering sphere of ice. Yet not all rogue worlds freeze entirely. Beneath layers of ice kilometers thick, heat from the planet core may warm the deep ocean. There may be slow-moving currents lit only by chemical reactions. In such dark oceans, life could continue, blind and patient. It would live in a world without a sky, a world that no longer knows sunlight. Civilizations that survive the loss of their star face a kind of existential test. They are stranded in the void, without direction. The night sky can no longer guide navigation. There is no galactic center to reference, no constellations to read. Their world becomes a ship without instruments. The stars outside grow too faint and then disappear altogether as the distance increases. Eventually, even the nearest suns cannot be seen. The world becomes the entirety of their cosmos. Time stretches on. The rogue star itself ages. Stars are not eternal. Every star burns its fuel. When the hydrogen in its core is gone, it begins to change. In the past, the death of a star meant the possibility of renewal. In a galaxy, the explosion of a giant star sent shockwaves into surrounding clouds of gas. Those clouds compressed. New stars were born. New planets formed. Carbon and oxygen spread. Life had a chance to appear again. But in a universe without gravity that connects stars into communities, the death of a star is final. When a rogue star reaches the end of its life, it expands into a red giant. Its heat increases. Any nearby planets that remain may be scorched. In worlds with life, oceans boil, atmospheres escape into space. What remains is a barren shell. After the expansion, the star sheds its outer layers. The beautiful cloud it releases does not feed a new generation of worlds. It disperses into the emptiness without ever collecting again. The core collapses into a white dwarf. In the galaxy era, a white dwarf cooled slowly among countless other suns. In the era of isolation, it cools alone. Light fades. The star becomes a black dwarf, cold and silent. Every time a star dies, the cosmos grows darker. The total supply of light declines. Fewer stars remain active with each passing era. The universe that once shimmered becomes dim. Rogue worlds now travel through a black ocean with no visible surface. They move only because motion began long ago, and nothing remains to alter their path. The concept of home once depended on belonging to something larger. A world belonged to a solar system. A solar system belonged to a galaxy. A galaxy belonged to the cosmic web. Remove those structures, and the word home becomes small. A planet clinging to a fading star is no longer part of anything. When its star dies, the planet becomes a world without a sun, cold and drifting forever. The end of sunlight is not abrupt. It is a long, slow fade. At first, the star dims just slightly. Seasons become colder. Winters stretch longer. The star still rises and sets, but it carries less heat each cycle. Then the daylight becomes thin. The horizon glows with a weak pale fire that no longer reaches the soil. Plants die. Oxygen drops. Life that relied on sunlight retreats underground or underwater. When the star finally goes dark, the world enters everlasting night. A planet without a sun no longer has a sky. There is only blackness, with perhaps a faint memory of starlight arriving from ages past. Space becomes quiet. The planet continues to drift across distances greater than the imagination of any mind. It will never meet another star. It will never know light again. Homes without suns are not just worlds without light. They are worlds without history, without direction, without future. They are the final remnants of a universe that once held together. In the first years without a sun, memory keeps life warm. Civilizations try to save what they can. They build chambers heated by geothermal vents. They mine fuel from the frozen oceans. Stories are told about the age of light while the last seeds are stored in vaults deep beneath the surface. They study the sky, hoping to understand what took the stars away. They do not know that the cause is not local. They do not know that galaxies have dissolved, star clusters have evaporated, and the very architecture of the universe has fallen silent. They are thinking of themselves as a world that has lost its sun. They do not yet understand that the universe has lost its gravity. The great oceans turn to ice from the top down. Beneath the ice, life continues for a while in the dark water heated from below by the planet. It swims slowly. It feeds on minerals and chemical gradients instead of sunlight. It knows nothing of the stars, nor that its world once circled a star in a spiral galaxy. That history has no meaning in the dark. The universe above the ice is black and still. A stray photon arriving from a distant star is so rare that detecting it becomes an event worth recording. Imagine a night where every 1,000 years one photon reaches your telescope. Imagine knowing that the light you caught began its journey when galaxies still existed. Nature adapts when it can. Even on a lightless world, heat exists deep inside. Every planet carries a memory of its birth in the form of internal warmth. But heat leaks away. The crust hardens. The underground oceans shrink. With enough time, even geothermal energy fades. When that happens, the last refuge of life becomes a place so cold that motion itself is difficult. Eventually, life ends, not through violence or catastrophe, but through exhaustion. Homes without suns are places where time keeps going after purpose stops. Meanwhile, the rogue star continues its journey. It moves across expanses that used to be outlined by the glowing filaments of the cosmic web. Those filaments once connected galaxies into structures that stretched for hundreds of millions of light years. The star does not pass through them anymore. The filaments are gone. The universe is losing its shape. What was once an intricate foam of structure becomes evenly spread dust. Matter is becoming uniform, like sugar dissolving into water. Every planet that remains bound to its star travels with it. They are passengers on a journey without destination. If those planets had once known night skies filled with stars, they now face nothingness. The only light is their own star, and even that light fades as the star ages. If they look outward, they see the blackness of a universe that no longer allows gatherings of matter. There are no galaxy clusters anymore. There are no nearest neighbors. There is no path back to where they began. The idea of a home once came from gravity. A world belonged to a system. A system belonged to a spiral arm. A spiral arm belonged to a galaxy. A galaxy belonged to a supercluster. Every scale depended on gravity binding smaller structures into larger ones. Remove gravity, and the ladder of belonging shatters from the top down. A planet without a sun is the smallest remaining rung. It is the final form of loneliness. In its silence, the planet continues moving. It might travel for ages, so long that stars are born and die in the distance, though their light may never reach it. It might travel through regions so empty that space itself seems different, thinner, less real. It exists in darkness and moves because motion was given to it long ago. If some advanced species once lived there, they face a truth that can only be learned in complete isolation. Belonging was never guaranteed. The universe did not promise stability. It allowed it for a time because gravity held structure together. Yet that time is over. In the final stage of a rogue world, there is no atmosphere. The last of the heat escapes. The surface cools to a temperature so low that matter becomes brittle. Rocks crack. Mountains crumble silently, breaking into dust that never moves because wind no longer exists. The planet becomes a frozen sphere, preserved perfectly, like a fossil of an era when galaxies once spun and stars once clustered, and worlds once knew light. If we could fly around such a planet and look upon it from above, we would not find ruins bathed in starlight. We would find a globe suspended in absolute darkness. No sunrise will ever occur there again. There is no horizon that glows, no dawn, no sky. Only the memory of warmth remains, trapped in layers of ice. When the last heat disappears from the frozen core and the world becomes indistinguishable from a dead rock drifting through the void, the idea of home disappears with it. A universe without suns is a universe where nothing orbits anything. Nothing returns, nothing cycles. It is the end, not just of light, but of place. Planets were never meant to wander forever. Their purpose came from belonging to something. The death of gravity removed that meaning. The death of stars removed their warmth. The death of memory removes their names. Yet the collapse of planetary homes is not the end of this transformation. Something larger still remains to dissolve. When stars become rogues and worlds freeze, the next collapse begins. The grand structure that once connected galaxies across distances larger than imagination now begins to vanish. The cosmic web itself begins to fade, and the universe prepares to enter an era without pattern. Every map of the universe we have ever drawn reveals a pattern. Galaxies are not scattered randomly like grains of sand thrown into the wind. They gather together in threads that stretch across distances measured in hundreds of millions of light years. These threads are the filaments of the cosmic web. They form a structure that resembles a network of rivers flowing through a sea of emptiness. At the intersections of these filaments lie galaxy clusters, hundreds or thousands of galaxies grouped together by gravity. Between these clusters are voids, empty regions so vast that an entire galaxy could pass through without touching anything. Gravity shaped this architecture. In the early universe, matter was almost evenly distributed, but slight differences in density allowed gravity to pull matter toward the regions where it was just a little more concentrated. Over time, those regions grew. Gas flowed into the emerging valleys of gravity, like rainwater running downhill into lakes. Galaxies formed inside those valleys. Clusters formed in deeper pools. The cosmic web became the blueprint of large-scale structure in the universe. Remove gravity, and the blueprint erases itself. Without the invisible pull that holds the web together, galaxies no longer gather. They drift apart. The filaments stretch, weaken, and break. The clusters expand. The great rivers of matter that once flowed toward deeper wells stop flowing entirely. Each galaxy, already dissolving into rogue stars, now also loses its relationship to every other galaxy. There is no large-scale pull, no distant attraction, no direction that leads to density. Each galaxy moves according to its final momentum, and that momentum is not aimed toward others. It is aimed away. The collapse of the cosmic web does not happen all at once. At first, distant galaxies still appear to sit in their places. The filaments remain visible because the light we receive left those galaxies millions or billions of years ago. Even after the web has fully dissolved, we still see its ghost. The universe shows us memories of its former shape, but as time passes, reality diverges from memory. In the space between clusters, the expansion becomes profound. In the era before gravity vanished, space was already stretching, driven by the presence of dark energy. Galaxies that were once gravitationally bound resisted that expansion, but without gravity, nothing resists. Space stretches freely, the distances grow faster and faster. The filaments that once held clusters together now lengthen like strands of pulled taffy. Then they thin, then they break. A cluster that once held thousands of galaxies becomes a scattering of drifting islands. They move apart until the human idea of togetherness no longer applies. The cosmic web collapses into absence. Imagine an observer watching from a safe vantage point outside of time. They would see the universe before gravity vanished as a grand lacework of structure. Then they would see the moments after. Every filament begins to stretch. The nodes dissolve. The threads fray. What was once a network becomes a fog. And, eventually, even fog disperses into nothing. The universe does not become chaotic. It becomes simple. Matter spreads evenly across an ever-enlarging space. The tug that once drew matter into clumps is gone, and nothing remains to oppose the expansion of the void. When everything drifts far enough apart, every point in the universe begins to look the same. No regions of density remain, no clusters, no filaments. The web is gone. The universe becomes smooth. Smoothness sounds peaceful, but it is a deeper form of emptiness. The beauty of the universe came from imbalance. It came from the struggle between gravity pulling inward and expansion pushing outward. Structure is the child of tension. When that tension evaporates, so does structure. The collapse of the cosmic web marks the end of context. There is no longer a here or a there. There are no locations that matter more than any others. Every place becomes equivalent. No region holds more stars. No region holds more worlds. The physical universe loses its hierarchy. On the larger scale, all that remains is an even distribution of matter drifting away from everything else. The cosmic web is a memory that fades with each passing million years. In the absence of gravity, the idea of perspective collapses. A star or a world drifting alone can no longer know that it once belonged to something larger. The night sky holds no pattern that reveals history. There is no direction in which more stars lie. There is no place to travel that will bring one closer to anything. Even the concept of travel changes. To travel implies a destination. In this universe, there are none. The old universe had a language, clusters, filaments, voids. It had verbs, collapse, accretion, formation. Now the universe speaks only stillness. The only verb is drift. As stars cool into black dwarfs and planets freeze into permanent night, the large-scale structure evaporates into irrelevance. The scaffolding that held everything together dissolves, and when the last filament fades, a new force reveals itself, not because it appears, but because everything else has disappeared. Dark energy remains. Dark energy was always there, working silently beneath the surface of the universe. It drove space to expand, and that expansion accelerated over time. Gravity resisted, trying to gather matter into clusters, galaxies, and stars. The world we once knew existed because those two forces argued. Gravity pulled inward, dark energy pushed outward. Structure emerged from the tension between the two. But now gravity is gone. Dark energy no longer has an opponent. It no longer negotiates with the pull of matter. It does not need to wait for gravity to weaken. The moment gravity is removed, expansion becomes the only rule. Every direction becomes a way. Every distance becomes larger. Every separation increases without limit. The cosmic web dissolves faster than before, not because dark energy accelerates, but because nothing slows it. Without gravity, there is no tug back inward, no balance point, no potential future where matter can gather again. The universe becomes an open hand releasing everything it once held tightly. Clusters that remained thick with galaxies begin to stretch. A cluster that once held thousands of galaxies now becomes a loose cloud. After more time passes, even that cloud separates into individuals. Then the individuals separate into single stars. Then those stars separate into particles. Space expands far faster than matter can interact. Every structure fades into isolation. In the era of gravity, the night sky was a kind of book written in stars. The constellations were chapters, galaxies were paragraphs. The cosmic web was the full story. In the era of dark energy, the pages of that book are pulled apart. The sentences fly away. The letters scatter. Eventually, nothing remains to read. On a world that once held awareness, telescopes would reach deeper into space, searching for remnants of structure. First, they would lose the view of the neighboring cluster. Then, they would lose sight of the filament that once connected their part of the universe to others. Each disappearance would feel like a tragedy, but the tragedy would not occur quickly. The disappearance would be observed not as an event, but as a loss of information over time. A galaxy cluster fades. A filament vanishes. The faint glow of the cosmic background becomes quieter. Dark energy does not roar. It whispers. It whispers outward. In the new universe, the space between objects grows so rapidly that light itself cannot cross it. A distant star may still shine, but the space between star and observer grows faster than the light can travel. Eventually, the light never arrives. Beyond a certain distance, objects slide beyond the cosmic horizon. It is not that they move. It is that the space between grows too quickly for light to bridge. Frontiers of existence disappear. The visible universe shrinks. Not because objects cease to exist, but because they cease to be observable. Observation becomes impossible. The universe becomes smaller in meaning even as it grows larger in size. A world orbiting a rogue star looks up at a sky that contains nothing outside itself. The universe is still full of matter, but all of that matter is unreachable. Expansion does not stop when structure ends. It accelerates. Every star that exists continues drifting outward, but now the space it drifts through stretches at a speed that nothing can match. The universe becomes something like an endless breath that never returns. In the age when galaxies existed, time had a sense of direction. Galaxies formed. Stars were born. They lived. They died. Elements recycled. Planets emerged. There was growth. There was evolution. In the age of runaway expansion, there is no growth. There is only separation. Expansion no longer reveals anything. It erases. The cosmic web collapses not into chaos, but into simplicity. The universe becomes uniform, smooth, even. All gradients vanish. The beauty of existence was in its structure, in the places where matter gathered, in the imbalance that allowed creation. With that gone, the universe becomes a blank canvas without ink. Imagine looking at a photograph of the early universe, a giant lattice of glowing knots and filaments. Then imagine a subsequent photograph taken long after gravity disappeared. There is no lattice, no knots, no filaments. Only a faint haze of scattered matter drawn thin across an ever-expanding space. The collapse of the cosmic web is the collapse of meaning. Galaxies once traced graceful spirals. They once collided and merged. They once produced stars that lit the darkness. Those were the active years of the universe, the time of growth, the time of energy moving and forming new shapes. The collapse of the web signals that those active years are over. What remains is not a stage. It is an empty hall where the stage once stood. Every star becomes its own universe. Every planet becomes its own captive story. Every particle exists alone. Increasing separation turns interaction into rarity, then into impossibility. There will come a time far beyond simple reckoning when a single atom could travel 1,000,000 light years without encountering another atom. Matter becomes thin, then thinner, then finally so sparse that calling it matter feels generous. The universe once had structure. Then it had isolation. Soon it will have emptiness. Dark energy does not destroy. It unbinds. Once gravity is gone, once the cosmic web dissolves, and once the stars are too far apart for light to travel between them, dark energy rules a universe without resistance. The final stars will still shine, but they will shine into vastness. Their light will travel forever and illuminate nothing. The future becomes permanent distance. When the collapse of the cosmic web is complete, the universe moves into a new era, an era where dark energy is no longer a force acting on structure. It becomes the only remaining engine. In the absence of gravity, darkness does not fall all at once. It spreads quietly, the way silence spreads across a field after the wind stops. For the first time since the beginning of the universe, there is nothing that gathers matter together. The last threads of the cosmic web have dissolved. Clusters have loosened. Galaxies have stretched apart and vanished into isolation. Stars themselves have scattered into lonely paths. What remains is an enormous expanding ocean of matter that no longer forms anything new. Yet even now, one force continues to operate: dark energy. When the universe was young, dark energy was weak compared to gravity. Matter was dense. Galaxies formed with ease. Clusters grew. The cosmic web took shape. Gravity was the shaper. Dark energy, the slow, distant shiver beneath the fabric of space-time. But expansion accelerated. Dark energy did not weaken. It persisted, working in silence. In the early days of humanity, astronomers observed that distant galaxies moved away faster than expected. The light from those galaxies was stretched, shifted to longer wavelengths. The expansion of the universe was not slowing down, it was speeding up. Dark energy could be described as the energy of empty space itself. It fills the universe evenly. It pushes between galaxies, between stars, between every fragment of what once held shape. If gravity is a sculptor that gathers, dark energy is a tide that separates. When gravity existed, dark energy was opposed. Now that gravity is gone, there is nothing left to push back. Expansion enters a new age. Every point in space begins to move away from every other point faster than before. Two drifting stars that were once close companions are now separated not only by their momentum, but by the growth of space itself. It is not motion that carries them apart. It is the swelling of the distance between them. There was once a time when light could cross the cosmos. Telescopes built by civilizations, long vanished, once looked outward and saw the glow of galaxies. Their instruments traced the delicate strands that tied clusters together. They measured the faint glow of the cosmic background, the remnant radiation from the birth of the universe. That radiation filled the night in every direction, whispering the story of the beginning. Now even that whisper fades. Dark energy enlarges space faster than light can travel. Regions that once shared the universe become unreachable. The visible universe shrinks, not in size, but in meaning. What can be seen becomes only what remains near the observer. Everything beyond a certain distance recedes faster than light can cross the ever-growing gap. Light is sent, but will never arrive. It is like speaking into an abyss that only deepens. In this era, a single star system is a universe unto itself. The night sky no longer shows distant suns, not because stars have vanished, but because the expansion of space is faster than their light. The darkness is not a lack of stars. It is a lack of information. No map can be drawn because no reference remains. Identify a direction and space expands behind you. Identify a destination and the destination slips farther away as fast as you move towards it. Travel becomes an illusion. The loneliness of the universe deepens. Objects do not collide. They do not interact. They only recede. If a wandering world still holds life deep beneath ice, that life will never know that the universe once held spirals of stars glowing like cities. They will never know that the cosmos once had structure. Their world will feel enclosed in a private void. They will not know that dark energy rules everything they cannot see. As more time passes, the expansion overwhelms not only stars, but systems. The space between planets grows. Even a tightly bound system begins to loosen. If gravity's absence means that objects no longer gather, dark energy's dominance means that objects cannot even remain near. An expanding universe without gravitational binding is like a melody without notes. Everything stretches until it loses identity. The remaining stars live out their lonely lives. They burn through their fuel without ever receiving light from another. They swell into red giants and then collapse into white dwarfs, glowing embers of what once were suns. They cool into black dwarfs, invisible to any eye. The time between these stages becomes nearly unimaginable. Even the white dwarf phase lasts longer than all of recorded human history, by orders of magnitude beyond comprehension. Yet dark energy continues, indifferent to the slow fading of light. Eventually, the last points of light scatter beyond each other's reach. Light no longer travels between stars because distance grows faster than the photons can move. Each star becomes a closed bubble of information. Nothing leaves, nothing arrives. The universe was once a conversation. Now it is a collection of solitudes. Dark energy does not move things faster through space. It makes more space between things. Motion remains constant, but the distance grows. It grows faster than motion can cross. The rule of dark energy is not violent. It is absolute emptiness. Imagine a star shining for 1 billion years, its photons streaming outward in all directions. Those photons carry stories about the star's temperature and age, stories written in light. They travel, but after a certain point, the space they must cross expands faster than they move. The photons drift backward from the perspective of the expanding universe. They never reach anything. The star sings into silence. Dark energy defines the ultimate fate of all structure. It ensures that everything becomes isolated. It ensures that no new structure will ever form. It ensures that the universe becomes uniform, empty, and still. Eventually, time stretches so far that every star has burned out. Every world has frozen. The cosmic web has vanished. The last filaments have dissolved. The last clusters have dispersed. The last glowing points have faded behind horizons that no observer can cross. The universe enters its final phase. Nothing remains to resist the spread of emptiness. Dark energy continues to work long after the last star has faded. In the previous universe, gravity gave the cosmos shape. Matter gathered, patterns formed. Now dark energy removes those patterns with a steady patience. It stretches the distance between every remaining particle. The expansion is not dramatic. It is steady, unavoidable, and eternal. With the universe expanded beyond all scale, darkness becomes the natural state. Even where stars once shone, their light no longer reaches any destination. The photons continue to exist, but the expansion of space stretches their wavelengths until they fade into emptiness. A photon that once carried the warmth of starlight becomes a soft whisper in the radio band. Given enough time, even that whisper becomes too faint to detect. Light does not vanish in a single moment. It is pulled apart until its identity dissolves. Isolated particles begin to feel the effects of the expanding void, not through motion, but through separation. Consider two particles separated by a few centimeters. Expansion stretches the space between them, then a meter, then thousands of meters, then more space than once existed between galaxies. Time no longer measures change in familiar ways. It measures only the growing distance between things that once interacted. Matter becomes thin. The average distance between particles becomes enormous. And still, the expansion continues. There is a moment when the universe becomes so large and so empty that nothing within it can touch anything else ever again. Interactions require proximity, but proximity is gone. Particles have no reason to move toward one another because there is no gravitational attraction. They float, carried only by the expanding fabric beneath them. The idea once called space becomes something like an unstoppable tide. In the era of gravity, every object had a trajectory that curved. Stars orbited, planets circled, matter flowed. In the era of dark energy, trajectories are straight lines drawn through ever-expanding emptiness. A particle moves forever in the direction it was pointed when the universe removed the last traces of structure. The universe no longer curves motion, it only stretches it. The final stars were once visible, then invisible, then unreachable. Everything reaches the horizon. The horizon is not a wall. It is a limit beyond which no information can ever return. When something crosses that limit, it is not gone. It is simply removed from the possibility of observation. Every star, every world, every particle eventually lies beyond someone else's horizon. The universe becomes a collection of isolated pockets, and then those pockets themselves are separated beyond the possibility of contact. Once the last visible traces of starlight fade, a new darkness settles. It is not the darkness of night. Night implies a dawn. This darkness has no morning. It has no end. It has no opposite. It is the final state of a universe without connection. The slow cooling of matter continues. The galaxies that once blazed like islands of light are gone. The cosmic web that once linked them has dissolved. The stars that once nourished worlds are only black remnants. Even black dwarfs cool beyond the memory of heat. They become lumps of matter waiting without purpose. The universe that once formed planets and oceans and living beings becomes a place where atoms sit cold and silent across unimaginable distances. In time scales so extreme that even imagination strains, matter itself begins to decay. Protons, once believed to be eternal, may eventually fall apart. The universe may transform from a place of matter into a place of radiation so thin it might as well be absence. If proton decay is real, the last remaining atoms crumble. If proton decay is not real, the last atoms remain as eternal dust, drifting without interaction. In either case, the result is the same. The universe loses structure at the deepest possible level. Dark energy continues working until even structure at the scale of particles becomes irrelevant. The universe becomes smooth. Not smooth like a calm sea, smooth like absolute zero. smooth like an erasure of every history the cosmos ever wrote. It is the universe returned to blankness. If a mind could exist in that distant age and look around, it would see nothing. Not because it is blind, but because nothing remains to be seen. It would hear nothing. Not because it is deaf, but because nothing remains to speak. The silence becomes perfect. Dark energy has finished its task. In a universe without gravity, without structure, without light, without interaction, nothing remains but the slow forward march of time. Long after the collapse of galaxies and the scattering of stars, a few remaining lights continue to burn. These final lights are not bright. They are not surrounded by worlds thick with life or companions in orbit. They exist in isolation. Each star becomes an island surrounded by a sea of night so complete that even memory begins to fade. The universe is vast, expanding, thinning and cooling. No new stars are born. No clouds gather. No cycles remain. Only the remnants continue to shine, each alone in a private darkness that no eye will ever witness. Every star begins its life through gravity. Gas collapses. Pressure rises, heat builds until nuclear fusion ignites. Hydrogen becomes helium. The star becomes a machine that turns mass into light. That cycle fueled the universe through its active years. But those years have ended. The youngest stars have already formed. The last star that will ever exist has already ignited. The universe is now in its era of decline. The great giants, the massive stars that once illuminated entire regions, were the first to vanish. They burned their fuel quickly, living, furious, and brief lives. They exploded in spectacular bursts that once seeded future generations of stars. In the age when galaxies existed, those explosions created new worlds. In the age of isolation, they produce only a lonely wave of matter lost to the void. Smaller stars survive longer. Red dwarfs, the most common type of star, burn their fuel so slowly that many will shine for trillions of years. But even that endurance has a limit. A red dwarf does not explode. It simply fades. First, its glow dims. Then its light becomes a soft ember. Eventually, it cools into a dark object, a black dwarf, a star that no longer shines. In the absence of gravity, a red dwarf drifts alone as it cools. It becomes a dying lantern held by nothing. It is surrounded by the infinite, by a darkness so large that even memory cannot hold onto reference points. There are no galaxies to pass, no clusters to join, no star born in the distance to greet its journey. The star continues moving until heat itself becomes a memory. White dwarfs, the remnants of stars like the sun, cool in the same slow silence. They shrink to the size of a planet, dense and hot. Without gravity on a cosmic scale, there is nothing to bring them together. They do not collide. They do not merge. They do not exchange mass. They cool in perfect solitude. Over unimaginable stretches of time, their heat fades. They become black dwarfs. A black dwarf is invisible. It is not a shadow. It is the absence of light. In this era, the universe becomes a sculpture of invisible objects drifting across impossible distances. The only reason a black dwarf could matter is if something interacts with it. But interactions require proximity, and proximity no longer exists. On even longer timescales, some strange possibilities emerge. If the lifetime of a black dwarf is long enough, the atoms inside it may slowly shift into more stable arrangements. The matter inside a black dwarf becomes iron. Not molten iron or glowing iron, cold iron. The star freezes from the inside out. It becomes a sphere of the most stable element in the periodic table, preserved perfectly in a universe too empty to disturb it. Yet even that state may not be eternal. If proton decay occurs, then even iron will not last. The black dwarf will begin to lose particles. The matter that once formed a star will evaporate into radiation so thin that describing it as something is almost generous. The decay would be slow, far slower than the lifetime of a star, slower than galaxies lived, slower than the age when life existed. Time itself becomes a medium through which erasure takes place. If proton decay does not occur, black dwarfs remain as the final monuments of a universe that once held creation. Alone, unguided, undisturbed, they would drift in an ever-expanding space that grows more empty with every passing age. There is no future where they meet, no interaction, no new structure. They are the final fossils of gravity. It is possible that the last lights in the universe are not stars. Near the end, the remaining light may come from quantum events. Particles may occasionally collide. Rare radioactive atoms may decay, producing a flash so weak it would escape notice from any eye. The universe becomes a place where the brightest event in 1 billion years is indistinguishable from silence. Time stretches. The last stars go dark. Their warmth fades. Their mass eventually dissolves or remains inert. Everything that once lit the sky is gone, and still the universe continues. In the final ages, space itself becomes colder than any planet ever felt. The idea of warmth becomes impossible. The past is not only forgotten, it becomes unreachable. No trace of what once existed can travel across the expanding void. Even light cannot bridge the distance. Memory is gone from physics as much as from history. The last lights fade. The last warmth disappears. The universe enters night. The last lights do not all fade at once. That would almost feel merciful. Instead, they disappear slowly, one after another, over time spans so long that even words like trillion begin to feel small. With every fading remnant, the universe becomes less a place of events and more a place of waiting. Motion continues, but nothing remains that can use motion. Light exists, but nothing remains to receive it. Time stretches while the universe cools towards stillness. A black dwarf, once the core of a sun, drifts through the expanding void. It contains the last heat of a dead star, trapped within its dense form. But heat leaks away. The glow fades from white to red, to ember, to darkness. The universe watches with no one left to witness. After ages longer than the entire age of galaxies, the final heat escapes. The black dwarf becomes indistinguishable from a rock. It is not that it stops existing, it is that existence no longer means anything. Imagine the surface of such a remnant. There is no light, no atmosphere, no sound. The temperature sinks so low that atoms barely vibrate. Everything that once defined motion becomes faint. If a single atom leaves the surface, it travels forever, never striking anything, never slowing down. It becomes a traveler through distances that no longer contain destinations. Somewhere else in space, the corpse of a massive star sits as a neutron star. Neutron stars are so dense that a teaspoon of their matter weighs more than all the mountains of a planet. But density no longer grants power. With gravity gone on cosmic scales and space expanding beyond reach, even such extreme objects drift powerless. Their rotation slows. Their magnetic fields weaken. Their final pulses fade. Once they emit their last whisper of radiation, they too become invisible. If any black holes remain, even they do not last. Without gravity, a black hole has no meaning. The curvature of space that once trapped light ceases to exist when the force responsible for that curvature disappears. The event horizon dissolves. Everything trapped inside is released. Not explosively, quietly. Space simply ceases to fold inward. The black hole ceases to be a hole. Its contents disperse into the infinite, becoming another cloud of matter that will never meet itself again. Nothing remains that can compress matter. Nothing remains that resists expansion. The universe once allowed dramatic endings. Giant stars died in explosions. Collisions created bursts of energy. But in this late age, every ending is slow. An event that should take only moments is stretched across incomprehensible time. Change becomes so gradual that it loses definition. The universe is not a drama anymore. It is a fading memory. Light from the early universe still travels, but expansion stretches it. What began as brilliant energy becomes cooler and cooler. The background glow that once filled all space weakens. First, it becomes microwave energy. Then it drifts into radio wavelengths so long that the waves could stretch beyond the size of stars. Eventually, the waves of this ancient light stretch beyond the scale of clusters, and then beyond the scale of what can even interact with matter. The final light becomes too long and too faint to register as illumination. It is not gone. It is simply meaningless. There is a strange beauty in the idea that the universe dies quietly. Most stories end with a final burst or a final revelation. The universe ends with neither. Its ending is the victory of silence over motion. Time moves forward. Particles decay or drift, depending on whether proton decay is real. If protons decay, the matter that once formed stars slowly dissolves into a fog of particles and energy so thin that one could pass through an entire volume the size of a galaxy and never encounter a single atom. If protons do not decay, atoms remain as an unchanging dust. Either way, the final state is not life, not structure, not pattern. It is emptiness. In this era, there are no calendars because there is nothing left to measure. Time becomes a stretch without moments. No event distinguishes one age from another. Heat death approaches. It is not a violent death. It is a reaching of perfect balance. In heat death, temperature becomes equal everywhere. Energy becomes evenly spread. There are no gradients. Gradients are necessary for change. Without difference, nothing moves from one state to another. No new stars, no new motion, no new chemistry, no new warmth, no possibility of life. The last lights go dark. The last heat flows outward. The universe reaches a state where nothing more can happen. Silence is complete. And then time keeps going because there is nothing left to stop it. At this stage, the universe does not contain stories. Stories require change. Stories require tension. The universe has none. The last lights have faded, yet the universe remains. It is a place without beginnings or endings, a place where the absence of motion is permanent, with no gravity to gather matter, and no stars to ignite, and no light to guide. The cosmos becomes a still sea of cold. Everything that once existed happened because gravity allowed structure and dark energy allowed space to expand around it. Without gravity, there is nothing to build. Without light, there is nothing to reveal. Without warmth, there is nothing to animate. All that remains is equilibrium, and equilibrium is the end of story. Yet from this ending emerges a realization. The universe without light reveals the universal requirement that made all structure possible. Life, worlds, stars, galaxies, all required the same permission, the permission of gravity. In the beginning, the universe was full of gradients, hot and cold, dense and thin, light and dark. Energy flowed from one place to another. It was that flow that allowed structure to exist. Galaxies formed because some regions had just a little more matter than others. Stars ignited because gas collapsed into knot after knot of rising pressure. Life emerged on worlds because heat and cold created cycles, and cycles created complexity. Everything that ever existed was the result of contrast. but in a universe that has lost all gravity, all contrast, eventually disappears. Every star has faded, every world has frozen, every particle drifts through expanding space, separated from its neighbors by distances that grow faster than light can travel. Galaxies are gone. Clusters have dissolved. The cosmic web has vanished. The very memory of structure has been erased. Dark energy continues to stretch space. Expansion has become unstoppable because nothing remains that could resist it. Now the universe enters a different kind of ending, one far quieter than any event that came before. It is not death by explosion or fire. It is death by balance. Heat, death. The universe becomes so evenly spread that no energy can ever flow again. Without flow, nothing changes. Without change, nothing matters. Heat death is not a moment. It is a condition, a universal stillness. Energy that once created stars is now diluted across distances so large that describing them becomes meaningless. The last particles of light have been stretched until they no longer carry warmth, no longer carry memory. Temperature is not cold in the way we understand cold. Cold is still a contrast. Heat death is a temperature so uniform that even the idea of cold loses meaning. Everywhere is the same, no difference, no motion. If gravity once gave the universe permission to build, heat death is the completion of its unbuilding. Imagine an ocean so calm that no wave ever rises. Now imagine that ocean is not made of water, but of the very fabric of reality. The surface is perfectly flat forever. That is heat death. It is not the absence of energy. It is the absence of gradients. When energy is evenly distributed, nothing moves, nothing changes, nothing becomes. Once, the universe was alive with change. Stars pulled matter inward. Dark energy pulled space outward. The tension between the two forces shaped everything that ever happened. Gravity gathered. Dark energy separated. They formed a cosmic conversation. Every galaxy was a sentence, every star a syllable, every planet a whisper. But in heat death, the conversation stops. Picture a single particle floating in space. It carries energy, but there is nowhere for that energy to go. There is no path where it could do work. It cannot meet another particle because distance grows forever. It cannot exchange heat because every region shares the same temperature. The particle becomes not an object, but a number. It has no role. It cannot influence anything. The universe no longer evolves. It only endures. If a consciousness could exist in such an era, it would not be bored. It would be erased. Awareness requires contrast. Thought requires difference. Information requires gradients of energy. In a universe without gradients, information cannot be stored, cannot be transmitted, cannot exist. Heat death eliminates not only stars and worlds, but the very possibility of memory. Some theories propose that, at this stage, black dwarfs remain. Dark objects that were once stars. They float in isolation through an expanding nothingness. But heat death drains even these remnants. Heat leaks into the expanding void. Atoms slow, molecules freeze. Eventually, every remnant of structure becomes indistinguishable from its surroundings. At this stage, time itself loses meaning. Time is measured by change, by the movement from one state to another. When no state differs from any other, what remains to measure time still exists, but nothing happens within it. In a strange way, the universe has become perfect. Perfect order, perfect stillness, perfect equilibrium. But perfection is the enemy of creation. The early universe was full of imperfections, full of tiny random fluctuations that allowed matter to gather, stars to ignite, and life to exist. Those imperfections were the seeds of structure. Heat death is the destruction of every seed. This is the end state of a universe where gravity was removed. It did not collapse inward. It did not explode outward in violence. It simply expanded until everything grew too far apart to interact, until energy spread too evenly to do work, until the fabric of space-time reached the maximum possible entropy. Entropy, the measure of disorder. But here, disorder becomes indistinguishable from uniformity. High entropy is not chaos. High entropy is sameness. The universe is now an infinite desert. There are no dunes, no wind, no change. Just a flat, unending field where nothing can be distinguished from anything else. Even the word universe becomes too large. What exists now is not a cosmos, but a condition. This is not death by drama. This is death by silence. This is death by balance. The final truth of heat death is that the universe does not end. It simply stops having anything left to say. If there had been a witness, they might search the dark and whisper the question, "What does a universe without structure mean?" They would receive no answer, not because an answer does not exist, but because nothing remains that could carry a response. Heat death is not the universe being destroyed. It is the universe forgetting it ever knew how to create. In the final ages after heat death has begun, the universe reaches a condition so complete that even imagination struggles to express it. There are no structures, no light, no shadow, no temperature difference anywhere. The entire cosmos is an ocean of uniformity. Every place is the same as every other place. Nothing distinguishes here from there, because distance has lost meaning. Without gradients, there is no past or future that can be felt. Time moves, but nothing happens within that movement. Consider how different this is from everything that came before. The early universe was full of contrast. It had hot places and cold places, dense regions where matter collected, thin regions where sunlight barely touched gas. In that uneven terrain, the laws of physics built mountains of possibility. Gas fell into valleys created by gravity. Those valleys collapsed into stars. Those stars created the heavy elements inside their cores. Those elements formed planets, oceans, and finally, living things capable of wondering why any of this had happened. Heat death removes the valleys. It removes the mountains. It removes possibility. The universe loses the ability to do work. Work is what makes change possible. Work is what allows things to happen. When a star shines, it converts nuclear energy into light. When a planet forms, gravity pulls matter inward and turns potential energy into motion. When life arises, chemical gradients allow energy to flow from one molecule to another. Work is the bridge between energy and action. In heat death, energy still exists, but it cannot do work. It cannot power anything because there is no difference between one place and another. The entire cosmos becomes a single uniform energy field, perfect sameness. At earlier stages, when galaxies still existed, heat death was a theoretical possibility. Physicists studied entropy and wondered whether the universe would expand into ever greater stillness. But those questions belonged to an age when galaxies still spun, when stars still formed, when life might still look toward the sky. In the era without gravity, heat death is not speculation. It is the unavoidable conclusion. The universe is now a perfect glass ocean of silence. Imagine a single particle floating in that ocean. It has energy, it has position, but there is no place it can travel that changes its relationship to anything else. There are no nearby particles to collide with, no atoms forming molecules, no molecules forming matter. The distance between particles becomes so immense that if a traveler could move at the speed of light, it would take longer than the age of the previous universe just to encounter one atom. Even if it reaches another particle, the energy exchange does not matter. Nothing changes. In this deep future, even radiation is stretched across unimaginable distances. Photons that once carried the light of stars are flattened by expansion until their wavelengths grow larger than galaxy clusters used to be. Eventually, those photons stretch beyond any meaningful limit and merge with the uniform energy of the background. They are not lost. They are diluted until they become indistinguishable from emptiness. The universe has become an ocean without waves. There is no more potential. Potential is difference, and difference no longer exists. Entropy reaches its maximum. Entropy is not chaos. Entropy is the measure of how many ways the universe can be arranged without changing anything. In heat death, the universe has achieved the highest entropy possible. No rearrangement makes a difference. No change alters anything. All arrangements are equivalent. The universe is no longer a story. A story requires tension. A story requires a beginning and an end. Heat death has no tension. It is the great equalization of everything that once mattered. Time becomes a line without markings. Events once acted as signposts. The formation of stars, the birth of galaxies, the cooling of worlds. In heat death, there are no events. 1,000,000 trillion years can pass, and nothing is recorded on the ledger of reality. This condition stretches onward. Even the concept of repetition loses meaning. Repetition implies cycles. Cycles require structure. Structure is gone. Some speculative theories imagine rare quantum fluctuations happening in this final silence. Fluctuations that could produce temporary blips of matter or energy. But even those blips dissolve instantly into the uniform ocean. They do not create stars. They do not form planets. They carry no memory. They pass like ripples on a pond that immediately settles back to stillness. The universe has become a place that cannot remember itself. Earlier, in the age of galaxies, intelligence could exist. Intelligence could reflect. Intelligence could build telescopes and wonder about distant suns. But intelligence requires complexity. Complexity requires energy flows. When the last gradients disappear, the universe no longer supports complexity. Consciousness requires difference. In heat death, there is no difference. If some impossible mind still existed, it would experience nothing. The universe grows empty, not just of matter, but of potential. Space expands eternally. Distances inflate without resistance. Every memory of structure becomes untraceable. The age when galaxies existed becomes an ancient myth written in light that can no longer reach anywhere. From this state, one profound realization emerges. Everything that ever formed every star, every world, every mind required the existence of gravity. Gravity gathered matter. Gravity created the gradients that allowed structure. Without gravity, the universe becomes smooth. Smoothness becomes emptiness. Emptiness becomes silence. Silence becomes permanence. Heat death is not the destruction of the universe. Heat death is the universe erasing every trace of what it once was. A physicist from the age of galaxies might ask a question that now echoes into eternity. What remains when nothing can ever change again? The answer is simple. The answer is final. Only time remains. Time without event. Time without memory. Time without meaning. When heat death is complete, the universe does not end. It simply has nothing left to do. In the beginning, the universe was motion without form. Energy expanded. Space stretched. Matter scattered like dust in a storm that had no destination. For a moment so brief it could scarcely be called a moment, nothing existed except possibility. Then, gravity took hold. Gravity reached across the expanding chaos and whispered a single command. Come together. Atoms obeyed. Gas gathered. Structures formed. From those gatherings came stars. From those stars came worlds. From those worlds came life. From life came questions. Gravity did not simply pull matter. Gravity allowed matter to become meaning. Now the universe reaches its final era. The era after light, after structure, after story. Heat death has spread silence across every corner of existence. No galaxies remain, no stars, no worlds warmed by suns. Matter is so evenly spread that nothing can form again. Nothing can change. Yet in this endless quiet, one realization stands above all others. Gravity was the permission slip for reality. Without gravity, matter has no reason to meet. Motion continues. But motion without meeting is not experience. It is solitude. It is the universe reduced to individual particles that never touch, never gather, never shape anything greater than themselves. We often imagine gravity as a simple pull, a downward force that keeps our feet on the ground. But gravity was never just weight. Gravity was possibility. It sculpted the raw chaos of the young universe and gave it architecture. It carved valleys for gas to collect. It lit the first stars. It allowed time to become history instead of emptiness. Without gravity, there is no history, only duration. Imagine the early universe as a giant blank canvas. Gravity dipped its hand into the paint of matter and drew spirals. It shaped galaxies so large that even light needed years to cross them. It allowed stars to ignite in swirls of fire. It placed planets into motion around those stars. It allowed warm soil to exist. It provided the stable orbits that life required in order to think long enough to wonder who it was. Gravity made thought possible. Without gravity, no star holds its planets. No planets hold their moons. No structure can remain. No pattern can persist. Life does not have time to learn, adapt, or remember. The universe without gravity is not simply a universe without galaxies. It is a universe without stories. Every chapter of cosmic existence depended on gravity. When supernova explosions enriched space with carbon and oxygen, gravity gathered that material into new clouds where new stars formed. When planets cooled, gravity held atmospheres in place. When oceans formed, gravity held them close to the surface. When chemical reactions became life, gravity gave those reactions a stable home. Gravity did not just allow structure, gravity allowed a second chance. The universe without gravity is final. There is no recycling, no gathering of remnants, no rising from ashes. Stars drift into isolation and die, alone. Worlds become silent forever. Heat death spreads uniformity until the universe becomes a blank plane of nothing but time. Gravity is the opposite of heat death. Heat death spreads everything evenly. Gravity concentrates. Heat death erases. Gravity writes. Somewhere in the deep future of the universe without gravity, imagine a single remnant of a once luminous star, a black dwarf drifting through endless night. Around it, space stretches so fast that no other object can ever reach it. That star once burned. It once warmed a world. It once lit a sky full of constellations. Now it drifts in perfect stillness. The absence surrounding it is not just silence. It is the absence of belonging. A world orbiting such a star might have once had oceans and life. In the old universe, when the planet cooled, that water could have cycled. Ice could melt. Seasons could change. Life could adapt. In the universe without gravity, nothing adapts. Everything simply ends. Gravity gave structure, and structure gave rise to complexity. Complexity allowed consciousness to emerge. When consciousness gazed at the night sky and wondered where it came from, it was witnessing its own origin story. It was watching the force that made its existence possible. Every star we ever admired in a sky, every world that ever bore life, every mind that ever wondered, all were temporary expressions of gravity. When heat death finally completes its slow erasure, the universe becomes a painting wiped entirely clean. There is no trace that anything ever happened. And yet, buried in the physics of everything that ever formed, there remains a truth that cannot be erased. Gravity was not just a force. Gravity was permission. Permission for matter to gather. Permission for stars to ignite. Permission for worlds to hold warmth. Permission for chemistry to learn. Permission for consciousness to ask why. The story of the universe is not the story of expansion. Expansion is simple. It pushes things apart. It spreads emptiness. The story of the universe was the story of gravity. Gravity resisted emptiness. Gravity fought disorder. Gravity built temporary pockets of meaning in a universe that always tended towards silence. In the end, dark energy wins, not because it is stronger, but because gravity can only shape what matter exists to shape. Once structure disappears, gravity has no canvas left to paint on. The universe returns to the silence it started with. But silence after a symphony is not the same as silence before a symphony. The difference is memory. Somewhere, long before heat death, long before galaxies dissolved, a species built a telescope. They looked at spirals of stars and wondered who they were. They named constellations. They saw patterns. They felt meaning. They did not know that meaning is simply the temporary victory of gravity over isolation. They stood on a small world and realized something astonishing. The universe made itself beautiful. Not because it needed to, not because there was purpose, but because gravity gave matter a chance to hold hands before the darkness took them apart. Gravity shaped the temporary miracle we call reality. Without gravity, nothing would have ever existed long enough to be seen. Without gravity, no stars. Without stars, no planets. Without planets, no life. Without life, no one to wonder. Gravity made wonder possible, and as the universe fades into perfect silence, the last truth spoken by matter is not a scream, but a whisper. Gravity does not just hold things together. Gravity gives the universe permission to exist. In the final universe, where every structure has dissolved, where every star has faded, where the fabric of existence stretches into a smooth and endless stillness, there remains no sign of what once was. There is no echo of galaxies, no shine of starlight, no warmth of worlds, no memory of life. And yet across that unimaginable emptiness, one truth survives. Everything that ever happened, everything that ever formed, every spiral of every galaxy, every orbit of every planet, every heartbeat of every living creature, existed only because gravity allowed matter to stay together long enough for meaning to emerge. Without gravity, motion continues forever, but motion without meeting is not relationship. A universe without gravity is a universe without closeness, without orbits, without cycles, without stories. Difference gave rise to structure. Structure gave rise to complexity. Complexity allowed consciousness. Gravity enabled difference. Even in this final cosmos, long after heat death has replaced contrast with perfect sameness, long after time has stretched so far that numbers lose the ability to measure, the remnants of what gravity once did remain as the deepest fingerprint in the laws of existence itself. The emptiness is total, but it is not meaningless. It is the aftermath of meaning, the faintest outline of a universe that once held shape. Imagine the very first moment after the birth of existence. Space is expanding. Temperature is enormous. Particles crash into one another with incredible energy. Everything is chaos. Nothing persists long enough to become anything. But then, a force begins to guide the chaos. A force that sees connections instead of separation. A force that gathers instead of erases. Gravity. It does not speak. It does not think. It does not choose. But by its very existence, it allows the universe to gather its scattered material into islands of order. Those islands become galaxies. Those galaxies become star nurseries. Those stars produce heavy elements. Those elements build planets. Those planets provide surfaces where water can pool. In that water, chemistry explores. It searches. It tries combinations. It learns. It becomes alive. Life is simply matter trying to remember what gravity allowed it to be. Life looks up at the night sky and wonders why stars exist. Stars exist because gravity allowed gas to remain together. Worlds exist because gravity carved orbits that were stable enough to endure. Consciousness exists because gravity protected environments long enough for complexity to unfold. Consider how fragile that allowance was. If gravity had been slightly weaker, matter would never have clumped. There would be no stars. The cosmos would be nothing but a thin, lifeless fog. If gravity had been slightly stronger, matter would have collapsed too quickly. Stars would burn too fast, leaving no time for life. Gravity was tuned just enough to allow endurance, but not forever. A perfect balance that permitted a temporary miracle. And now, the miracle is finished. The universe rests. It has returned to uniformity, the same condition it came from, but with a profound difference. Before, nothing had ever formed. Now, everything that could form has already done so. The universe is not empty because it failed. It is empty because it succeeded. Picture a world that once orbited a star. Picture its oceans, its sunrise, its wind moving across mountains. Picture its sky filled with constellations that civilizations once named and told stories about. All of it existed because gravity held that world close to its sun. Without gravity, that world would have never known warmth. Without warmth, no atmosphere. Without atmosphere, no breath. Without breath, no mind to wonder. Gravity did not just hold matter together. Gravity held moments together. There is a kind of grace in the ending. No explosion, no collapse, no violence, just stillness, just rest, just the universe returning to the silence from which it began. Except now, the silence contains the memory of stars. The final truth is not found in darkness. It is found in what the darkness followed. The universe was once full of fire. It was once full of color. It held worlds where life loved and lost and learned. It contained minds that gazed upward and tried to understand. Those minds created meaning. They reached upward and discovered that gravity is not a prison. It is permission. Permission to gather. Permission to remain. Permission to connect. Even now, at the end, that truth is unchanged. The universe is silent, but what once existed was magnificent. It was brief, but it was real. What gravity allowed was not permanent, but it was enough. Enough to build galaxies, enough to build worlds, enough to build minds capable of awe. No symmetry in nature lasts forever. But the gift gravity gave was never permanence. The gift was the chance to exist. When the last vibration fades into stillness, when every particle drifts into infinite separation, when time stretches into a horizon with no events left to mark its passing, the universe speaks its final sentence without a voice. Gravity did not just shape the universe. Gravity gave it permission to exist.